is the section that is called the Syro-Ephraimite crisis. You've got the two nations to the north, Syria, of course, to the far north, and in Israel, or Ephraim, the major tribe, just to the north of Judah, and they're creating a crisis in Judah. And so that's really kind of the theme of chapters 7 through 12. And we'll shift themes when we get to chapter 13. But that's the theme that we're going through right now. And some of the sections we're going to kind of summarize. Some of the sections we'll spend a lot of detail upon. And this is one of the sections that we're spending some time upon. There are certain prophecies in this section. You've got the prophecy that we looked at in Isaiah chapter 7 about the virgin that's going to have a child who would be called Emmanuel. We looked at that. Then you've got the prophecy in chapter 8 about the coming of a new child to Isaiah's family. And there is a timeline that's set forth even before this child is able to really talk and to say mother and father, that this crisis is going to come to an end, that they need to continue to put their trust in God. Well, even so, in this chapter that we're going to look at, chapter 9, we come back to another major point about another major prophecy that you'll see as you get a little bit farther down into the chapter. So let's start in chapter 8:22, because really I think the thought begins in chapter 8, verse 22. And so we'll treat that like it's the beginning of this chapter, and we'll read on down through the first verses here of Isaiah chapter 9. So in Isaiah chapter 8, verse 22, I want you to notice the gloom that's upon the land. Then they will look to the earth and see trouble and darkness, gloom of anguish, and they will be driven into darkness. Chapter 9. Nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed. And when at first he lightly esteemed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterwards more heavily oppressed her by the way of the sea, and beyond the Jordan, in Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who walk in darkness and have been a great light, those who dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. You have multiplied the nation and increased its joy, and they rejoice before you according to the joy of harvest, as men rejoice when they had divided the spoil. For you have broken the yoke of his burden, and the staff of his shoulder, and the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. For every warrior's sandal from the noise of battle, and the garments rolled in blood, will be used for the burning of fuel of fire. Okay, so let's take this section. This kind of introduces us to a child that's going to be born in verses 6 and following. But let's take this section as it is. So you start out, and really, if you want to title these first verses, what we have is better days. There's going to be better days ahead. And he starts out with gloom and darkness upon the land. And just to remind you, the gloom and darkness would come for two reasons upon this land. We saw last time in chapter 8, and really it starts talking about this long before chapter 8, but you've got the king of Assyria. And he's going to come upon the land. He's going to come upon the land like a flood. And he is going to flood completely Israel. He's going to destroy Israel. And Judah is barely going to survive. It's going to be up, the flood's going to be up to their necks, but they're going to make it through. But nevertheless, the flood of Assyria is coming upon the land. The second reason for the darkness is hinted at in, we'll explore it a little bit more here in just a moment. But if you remember, at the end of chapter 8, he says, if you're going to people to advise you. And he says, if they speak different than God's word, it is because there is no light in them. So why was the land dark? Well, it was dark because it was a bad time in the land because Assyria was coming. But you know why it was really a bad time? They were listening to wrong advisors. And that's what brought darkness upon the land. And so you kind of have all of that as a background. So if you could think about darkness, and out of this darkness breaks forth light. It's morning again in Israel. If you want to use a phrase from a few years ago, nobody got that, did they? There used to be political campaigns that says it's morning again in America. Do you remember that? Well, it's going to be morning again in Israel. Yes. The people are looking for counsel that have no light in it. They're looking to false prophets and all kinds of other sources. Okay. So what we have is light that breaks forth upon the land in chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. The people who walk in darkness, they have seen a great light. All right. He mentions the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. If you were to look at a map of Israel, where are those two countries located? Or those two tribes located in the country? Anybody remember? They're at the far north. They're the far north of Israel. And you know what land fell into darkness first from the Assyrians? Yeah, but what tribes? Zebulun and Naphtali are the first ones who had the effects of Assyria come upon them. But now you've got light shining, and the first place it shines is Zebulun and Naphtali. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, we'll look at that here in a second, as far as a passage in the New Testament that's about this. Let me just kind of remind you of some cities that are located there. Nazareth is located in Zebulun. And Capernaum is located in Naphtali. Where did Jesus start his ministry? Nazareth, and then he moved to Capernaum, right? That's the reference. So with that in mind, somebody read Matthew chapter 4, verses 13 through 16.
Fulfill what was said through the prophet Isaiah. Land of Zebulun and land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, and light has come.
So that's the reference. And so what we have is a reference in the New Testament that this is what it's referring to. The land of Zebulun and Naphtali were the first to go into darkness. They're also the first to see light. And so light shines forth from this place that was once in darkness. And they're going to see that. They're going to experience that. They're going to be a part of that. And so he's pointing to the Messiah. is what he's pointing to actually at this time. Now, you ask where I got the, what the second point of darkness was. If you look back for a moment to chapter 8, verse 19. And when they say to you, seek those who are mediums and wizards, who whisper and mutter, should not a people seek their God? Should they seek the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. So, chapter 8, verse 20, if they don't speak according to this, it's because there is no light in them. And as you read on down through this, it talks about the darkness and the gloom that's on the land. And as you move into chapter 9, what do you come out with? Light shines again. And so light breaks forth in the land once more. That's the message. Didn't Jesus say, I'm the light of the world? You also have this joy that's mentioned in verses 3 through 5. Overwhelming joy. He says it will be as when Median oppression was over. So the reference there is to Judges chapter 7 and 8. You remember Gideon with his small band of 300 in their conquest and their victory that God gave them over this larger enemy. Can you imagine the joy that they must have had when the yoke of oppression was broken? He says, well, the yoke of oppression is about to be broken again under this Messiah. Now, if you were a person reading this, you might be thinking he's talking about breaking the yoke of some oppressor such as Rome or some other nation that's oppressing you. But that's not what this has in mind at all. It's the yoke of oppression of sin that's going to be broken. And so language of the Messiah coming forth, it's going to be like morning again, and it's going to be like victory over enemies. The oppression is going to be over. No doubt there's going to be great joy. Then he talks about the nation being multiplied. Now they've looked at the nation being winnowed away. I mean, it's divided, and now it's being conquered here and there, and parts of it are being taken. He says in verse 3 about this Messiah, you have multiplied the nation and increased its joy. Multiplied the nation. Not only does he free them, not only does light break forth in these tribes, he's going to multiply the nation. I believe this probably refers to the Gentiles coming in. He talked about the Gentiles in chapter 2, verse 2, and he's going to talk about the Gentiles in connection with the Messiah all the way through this book. Look at Isaiah chapter 42. So in verse 1 of Isaiah 42, behold my servant whom I uphold, my elect one in whom my soul delights. So this is an introduction to this Messiah. I have put my spirit upon him, and he will bring forth justice to the Gentiles. Verse 6, I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness and will uphold your hand, and I will keep you and give you the covenant to the people as a light to the Gentiles. He's a light upon the land of Zebulun. He's a light upon the land of Naphtali. Guess what? He's also a light upon the land of the Gentiles. He's a light upon the land of the earth. That's the Messiah. And this victory is going to be, I think the language as you look at verse 5 is of complete victory. The warrior sandals and their garments, they're going to be used for burning fuel. If you have complete victory over your enemies, and there's several occasions of this in the Old Testament, what do you do with everything that's left? Well, sometimes you just use that for supplies. And so they're burning it. So this Messiah is going to give complete victory. There is going to be a breaking out of light. Now, we don't know that he's talking about a Messiah yet. He just talks about a light bursting forth and oppression being over and all of this. But he's going to introduce us to the Messiah in verses 6 through 8. All right, any thoughts down through verse 5? Yes. Uh, well, it's hard to say in this case because it doesn't specify, but I actually think the message is primarily, while there's a message for everybody else later, it's a message for the people then. You see that in Daniel as well. Daniel addresses his own people, and he tells about things that's going to happen years and years later under the Messiah. So what's the point? The point is God has not given up on this nation. He made a covenant with these people. And he told them that he was going to bless all of humanity through this people. And they need to know this blessing's coming and that he's not done with them just because they're suffering at this point. And so, yeah, I believe the message is for them. It certainly has an application for people much later where they can look back and glean something from the message. But I think he's trying to encourage them as they go through these dark days.
Did they receive any break in the oppression during the 4-year time?
Israel's not. Judah does. Judah seems to have delayed the inevitable for a little while, but the northern kingdom, it's going down, and he's going to make clear you're done, and he's going to list reasons why they're done before it's finished. But he wants them to know that even though they're done as a nation, it's not over. He's not breaking his covenant. He's going to keep his covenant, and there's still going to be a blessing that comes through this nation in the future. But as a people, they're done at this point. They're about to go into captivity. What else? All right, let's look at verses 6 through 8. Here's where the Messiah comes in. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. All right. So let's walk through this. A child is born, a son is given. I don't think those two things are exactly the same. The child is born refers to no doubt the birth of Jesus. He was born of woman. Son given. Given by who? By God. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 4, we're told about Jesus these words about his birth. That when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, given by God, born of woman, born under the law. Galatians 4, verse 4. He's born of woman. He's born under the law. God gave him. And so a child is born, a son is given. Concerning his kingship, the government's going to be upon his shoulder. Verse 6, that language is not unusual. It appears other times in the Bible. It simply refers to the fact he is going to be um, he's going to be given this authority over the government. The government, the right to rule is going to be upon him. Concerning this kingship, it's called the throne of David. The throne of David. Somebody look at Acts chapter 2 and read verse 29 through 36. Acts 2, 29 through 36. Uh-huh. He's Lord in Christ. He's on David's throne. Luke chapter 1 makes the same point when you talk about his birth, verses 32 and 33. He will be great. He will be called the Son of the Highest. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever. In his kingdom there will be no end. Taking you right back to the language that we're looking at here. The throne of David. One of the mistakes that some people have today is they literalize everything. And so when they think about the throne of David, they think it must be a literal throne that must exist in a literal place, such as Jerusalem, that he has to sit upon. No. The throne of David is the throne of God, 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 35. The throne of Solomon is the throne of David, 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 12. The throne of Solomon is also called the throne of God in 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 23. All the term means, when it talks about the throne of David, is we're talking about the fact that authority, divinely given authority, delegated authority has been placed upon this one. He's got the right to rule. And so that's all that's being said. It shouldn't be taken literal. But concerning this kingdom, it says the increase of his government there will be no end. Does that sound like an earthly king? No. He's not hindered by geographical boundaries. He's not hindered by time or by death like other rulers are. There's going to be a continual increase in the kingdom over time. The church is going to grow, and every addition to it is an addition to it. I think we have to keep in mind the kingdom is not only here upon this earth, it's in the realm beyond, isn't it? And so when a member of the church dies and goes to the other side, he's still a part of that kingdom. And so every addition that takes place on this earth is getting added to that number that exists. This kingdom is going to continue to increase in number over time. So that's the point. And so this is a reference to the authority of a king. And his kingdom is not going to come to an end like the other kings do, and it's just going to continue to increase. Now we start laying out the description of this king. I would suggest to you there are 4 descriptions of the king. Some people say 5. Wonderful counselor, Now, there's a lot of translations that are put a comma between the two and treat them almost as if you've got two different things going on there. I don't think so. If you look at the context and how things are paired up, you don't have mighty and then God separated. It's mighty God. You don't have everlasting and Father separated. It's everlasting Father. And you certainly don't have Prince and Peace separated. It's the Prince of Peace. I think these are paired up, and He is the wonderful Counselor. Now, how does that fit the context? Well, the context is back in chapter 8, verse 20 that we read, they were going to people who have no light in them, and they're looking for counsel. And when you come here into chapter 9, what happens? There's light upon the land. It's morning in Israel again. He's the wonderful Counselor. In Zechariah chapter 6, verses 12 and 13, an interesting thing. Actually, we looked at it this morning in Wednesday morning Bible class, but his counsel is described there. And notice in Zechariah chapter 6 how it's worded. You got the man, his name's going to be called the branch. He's going to build the temple. Verse 13, he's going to sit and rule on his throne. So he shall be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace, notice the term council, the council of peace will be between them both. What's them both? Well, his roles. He's going to be a king, and he's going to be a priest at the same time. You know how revolutionary that was to any Jew to consider that you're going to have somebody who comes along that serves both as a king and a priest? Never happened. Never happened. Priest came from one tribe, king came from another. Well, this guy's going to be different. And not only is he going to be different, his counsel has to do with the roles he's got. He's going to be king priest, as we said, but he's called Wonderful Counselor. Never a man spake like this. Even those who were sent to arrest him would come say, Wonderful Counselor. Now, my question is where do we go for counsel? If you had, Stephen Lloyd put out a little book called Coping, and I meant to bring it out here and give you the exact quotation, but I'll summarize it. It's basically a counseling book for based on the Bible, but he makes a point in there. He said, let's say you had Maslow, you had Sigmund Freud, you had Einstein, you had Jesus, you had this dinner with all of these people, and you wanted some advice. Where would you turn? He said almost everybody who's a Christian would say, I would turn to Jesus. He said, it's good. He said, but if you look at where we actually turn, he said, why is it that so many of us, we don't turn to the Bible? We go to the bookstore and get the self-help book and find out what Maslow and Freud and other people have to say about things. Now, I'm not saying you can't learn something from other people. But folks, everything we need to know to please Him and how to live life in a right way, it's found in God's Word. And yet what is it that is the biggest section of most bookstores? Self-help books. Self-help books. So where do we turn for counsel? Number 2, Mighty God. He's going to be called Mighty God. Now let's link some passages together. We saw in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, that the one that was going to be born was going to be called what? Emmanuel. God with us, right? Now you come to chapter 9, and he's going to be called Mighty God. We could also link other passages like Micah chapter 5, verse 2, the one that was to be born, when you talk about his birth again, his going forth to have been from old, from everlasting. Now the term Mighty God appears a few times in the Bible. And it is true that the term God can simply refer to power, might. If we take the time to look at it, I think it simply refers to power, and it can refer to judges and things like that. And so some have tried to diminish this and say, well, it's not really saying that this is God. Oh, really? Let's look at the same book, okay? Come over to chapter 10, verses 20 and 21. And it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel and such as have escaped to the house of Jacob will never again depend upon him who defeated them, but will depend upon the Lord. That's could be rendered Jehovah. Will depend upon the Lord, the Holy One of Israel in truth, and the remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. Who God is Jehovah. So the one we're talking about, he's called Counselor. He's called Mighty God. He is called Everlasting Father. Everlasting Father. Or Eternal Father, some versions say. Now, that bothers some people. What do you mean he's the Everlasting Father? I thought there was a difference between the Father and Son. Yes, there's a difference between the Father and Son. Now, I mean, just for simplicity's sake here for a second, can you be a son and be a father at the same time? Oh, absolutely. But what is intended by him being called Eternal Father or Everlasting Father? Well, there are several ways the term Father is used in Scripture. And here are some possibilities. I'll tell you how I think it's being used. It'll be the last point. The term Father can be used of simply a creator or an originator. Father of lights, for instance, in James chapter 1, verse 17. I don't think that's the point here, but it is true Jesus is our creator. It can be used for one who cares for, protects, provides for, instructs others. Job chapter 29, verses 15 and 16. He was a father toward those that needed his guidance. Not that he was a biological father. Joseph was a father in the land of Egypt. Genesis chapter 45, verse 8, in his role as he guided Pharaoh and the people through this crisis. And it is true that Jesus is our guide and he holds all things together. But I don't think that's how this is being used either. The term father can be used with authority. And I think that's a reference. And the reason I think it's a reference is because that's how the term father is used later in the same book. Somebody look over to Isaiah chapter 22 and read verses 20 through 22. Isaiah 22, verses 20 through 22.
In that day I will summon my servant Eliakim, son of Hilkiah. I will call him with your robe and fasten your staff around him, hand your over him. He will be a father for those who live in Jerusalem and the people of Judah. I will place on his shoulder the keys of the house of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I will drive him like a peg into a firm place. He will become a seat of honor to the house of his father. All the glory of his family will hang on him.
That's good. Okay, so he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Does that mean he's going to father them biologically? No. What's it mean? It means he's going to have authority over them, right? So Jesus is referred to as the everlasting or the eternal Father. What's it mean? It means he is going to be over this people. It's got to do with his kingdom not having an end. It's got to do with his authority. I would suggest to you as a meaning. And then he's called Prince of Peace. Now, you remember that peace has been seen before in this holy mountain. We saw back in chapter 2 that they're going to, there's going to be a transition where they beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Chapter 2, verse 4, talking about the establishment of this kingdom. In chapter 11, he's going to come back to the fact that people are not going to hurt in his holy mountain, which I would suggest to you is the church. In other words, if they're truly following him and they're a part of his kingdom, they're going to be a different kind of people. So Isaiah is picturing things how they ought to be under him. And so he's the Prince of Peace. The message of Jesus brings peace. It's called the gospel of peace many times. He brings peace between man and God. Numerous passages teach that. He brings internal peace, a peace that passes all understanding, and he brings peace between men. He reconciles men to men. He reconciles Jew to Gentile and Gentile to Jew. He makes them one and puts them into one body. And so the one that we're talking about has all of these qualities. The one that we're talking about is mighty God. The one that would come is not just a man. As you look at the last part of verse 7, chapter 9, verse 7, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. The Lord does this, not man. Remember, he took you back to Midian and how they had victory over Midian. How did they have victory over Midian? God gave it to them. They didn't do it themselves. God gave it to them. Well, who's going to do this? God's going to do it. And it's going to be done because he is zealous to do it. He's on fire to do it. He's energized to do it. He's not cold toward this. He is hot toward this. This is his plan, and he wants to see it fulfilled. And so that's what's going to take place. This Messiah is going to come forth, and he's going to rule the way it ought to be ruled. And he's going to establish judgment and justice forever. All right, any thoughts down through verse 7? We're about out of time. We're going to give a very quick summary of the rest of the chapter. From verses 8 to the end, you've got punishment upon Israel. Just to summarize, the northern kingdom had suffered some kind of destruction, verse 10. Some think this refers to the earthquake that's mentioned in Amos chapter 1, verse 1, or Zechariah chapter 14, verse 5. Whatever the case, but they arrogantly say they didn't get the message. The message was to humble them, but they arrogantly say, we're going to rebuild. And so God says, okay, I'm going to send adversaries, the adversaries of reason. That is Assyria and their allies against you. Syria, the Philistines, and Israel were all part of an anti-Assyrian alliance. Well, they're going to come. And he says it's not going to be good, but I'm not done. It's a phrase, the refrain that's found in verse 12b. For all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. This occurs 3 times in this chapter. That is, God's not done. And he's not going to be done until you're totally destroyed. He says in verses 13 through 16, for all of this, for all that was done, they still did not turn to me. They still did not repent. You might tie that in as a cross-reference to Amos chapter 4, verses 6 and following. He said, I sent them famine, and yet they did not return to me. And I sent them cleanness of teeth. That is, they didn't have food, and they still did not turn to me. And he goes through all of this, and he says, therefore, I'm telling you, prepare to meet your God. Well, this is the same type language. He says both the head and the tail is going to be cut off, verse 14. The head being the national leaders, the tail being the false prophets, maybe called the tail because they're actually following the wishes of the people and not simply stating how it is. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 10. They're telling the prophets not to speak to us the right things, speak to us smooth things. Punishment's coming. It's going to be indiscriminate. There's an interesting point in verse 16. He says the real reason for your downfall is the leaders. The leaders cause them to err, and those who are led by them are destroyed. Following the wrong leader is not going to be an excuse. It's going to bring devastation. And again, you got the refrain, God's not done. And then in verses 18 through 23, he gives three reasons for this punishment. Really, it goes into chapter 10 as well, because he's going to pronounce certain woes upon the people, and then he'll turn his attention to Assyria. And that is, just because I'm using Assyria doesn't mean that I'm pleased with Assyria. Woe to them as well. But the first cause of the punishment, verse 18, is wickedness burns in the land. You've got a fire upon your hands. It's your own wickedness. Number two, second cause of the punishment is the wrath of God. The wrath of God's not going to tolerate this wickedness. And then the third cause, notice verses 20 and 21. And he shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry, and he shall devour the left and not be satisfied. Every man will eat the flesh of his own arm. He's going to turn against himself. Manasseh shall devour Ephraim, and Ephraim Manasseh. Together they shall be against Judah. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. Third cause, brother against brother. Brothers aligning themselves with each other to overthrow another brother. When you go throughout just earthly history of nations, most of the time when nations fall, it's not when they're strong and united, it's when there's already weakness and division and turmoil within, and that's when nations from the outside come in and take advantage of that. Well, they're divided. They've created a mess where society is not what it's supposed to be. You've got brother against brother, tribe against tribe. You've got, we introduced before, you've got the nation of Israel to the north who wants to come down and overthrow the king of Judah in the south and put their own king upon the throne. And so you've got all of this turmoil going on. And he said that's why the punishment's coming too. Because there's injustice. And so that's chapter 9. Chapter 10 will be the woes against these people. And then he'll turn his attention to woes against Assyria. And we get past chapter 10 and we get another high point. We get another messianic role view in chapter 11. Now, back to what Carlos asked, is this how would this help them? Well, I think it helps him in a number of ways. And I think you see that when you get to Isaiah 40 through 48, where he talks about nobody else can foretell the future like I do. I'm telling you who I am. I'm telling you I'm God. And you're going to see all this come to pass. And then you're going to realize who I am. And I told you beforehand. He's trying to save Judah. He's trying to turn Judah around. He's trying to give them an opportunity. Israel's done. They're going to be destroyed. And the message is not so much to change them at this point. It's simply to tell them what's going to happen and to lay some things out so that they'll know that the one who spoke was indeed God. that he told it how it was, and he told the future, and he told them he told them how things were going to be. And so some of this looks way into the future. Some of it looks more closely into the future about their own downfall. But that's not unusual. All the prophets do that. Even with, I mean, think about Abraham. Abraham was promised a land, and he was told about in his seed all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Did Abraham ever see any of that? Never did. He trusted God. He never saw it himself. God does that sometimes. He tells you what's coming, but it doesn't mean that you're going to see it in your lifetime. But he is giving them enough information that some of these things they are going to see in their lifetime, and they're going to learn that they ought to trust him. It'll be too late for most of them, but they're going to learn that. All right, that's your lesson for tonight. Let's wrap this up. I appreciate your attention. What I want you to think about is that what you have in looking at Isaiah or any of the prophets is you have references to what is to come in the Messiah, in Jesus. Why do we believe that Jesus is God in the flesh? Folks, it's not just because somebody came along in the first century and said it. It's not because Jesus came along and said it. As a matter of fact, Jesus didn't go around saying it too often. But he did point them to the scriptures. And what did the scriptures say? The one that would come is the mighty God. He's the almighty God. That's what he is. And so there's prophecy there. And when you consider that, and you consider the details of that, and you walk through it, it ought to build your faith up that you can trust this book. That's what it's there for. And he's going to make the point in Isaiah chapter 40 through 48. All of your gods, I challenge them to tell the beginning from the end. Show me that they can foretell what's coming. They can. And he says, I alone am God. There was none before me. There'll be none after me. I am the Lord. I am Jehovah. So let us put our faith in him and our trust in him and know that he is a merciful God. He gives us opportunity to return. That's what the message is ultimately about. He's trying to get people to come to him before it's too late. If you need to respond tonight, won't you do so at this time as we sing?